you know that by heart by now? I have a feeling I have a lot of friends here. So with that in mind, I don't want to give a lecture. I want to have a conversation. And I was thinking, I really would love to have brought in a baby with a green rug. So instead, I'm going to use a couple of videos. And so I thought I'd start off telling you why I love Roots. And we don't endorse any programs. This is the only program we endorse. I met Mary in 2006 with Fraser. And Fraser loved Mary. And you could not say no to Fraser on anything. And he forced me, if you knew Fraser, you will know I'm not exaggerating here. He forced me and then quizzed me the next day to read her book. And it's an extraordinary book. It's a really, really good book. And there are three things about it that I loved, that I still love. And it's the reason why I think this is an important program. The first thing is it's a universal program. And so much of what was happening, and is still to some extent happening in Canada, so much of it was targeted. So much of the work that we do in mental health was really aimed at the clinical population, which still remains relatively small. It's growing, but it's still relatively small. But Roots is not. Roots is for every single kid. So I love that. The second thing I loved is that the focus is on well-being. So many of the programs that we look at are really about pathologizing kids. And Roots is the opposite. Roots is about prevention. There's no doubt about it. So we're trying to prevent what you just saw, trying to prevent bullying or trying to prevent various kinds of externalizing disorders. But it's really more about promotion. It's about promoting mental health, promoting mental well-being. And I really don't know of other programs, certainly not on a scale like this anywhere in the world. The third reason why I like Roots, love Roots, was the most important, and that is it's about the roots. And that's what I loved about the book. And you've heard me say it before, because what Mary did was she did her homework. And it really is about the roots of social emotional competence, looking at, in particular, mind reading, the child's ability to recognize and understand affect cues. And in a very interesting way, it's about self-regulation. And that's going to be my theme for tonight. As Lisa just told you, we have been rolling out this self-regulation initiative. This is not a program. This is a framework. Self-regulation is, of course, a mechanism, which I'm going to explain tonight. And it has exploded on us, particularly in those provinces that were already or are seriously interested in doing Roots. Are you going up to Northwest Territories?
No, but just ask me.
Okay. So, well, be careful what you wish for. I was just there. It was minus 51. Roots, you will never see the word self-control or the term self-control in Roots literature or in the Roots book. It's really about one of the core aspects of self-regulation. It's our fourth domain in our book, our fourth and fifth domains. And I just came from a meeting a couple of minutes ago, and they were asking me, what is the biggest confusion we've encountered as we roll out this initiative, which is now really in about half the country. And there's no doubt that the biggest single confusion is the confusion between self-control and self-regulation. So that's going to be our theme for tonight. But I'm going to try to do it in a certain way. I'm going to try to show how self-regulation is the roots of empathy. Okay, so that's our theme. So the first thing we have to get clear on is what it's not. So self-regulation has absolutely nothing to do with a child making an effort to inhibit his or her impulses or making an effort to delay gratifying a desire. In fact, these classic examples of self-control are housed in a completely different part of the brain from self-regulation. Self-control is housed, as you'll learn when Phil Zalazzo comes here, this is what Phil does. control is housed in the medial prefrontal cortex, in the newest part of the human brain. And it's really the last part of the brain to develop, to maturate. And it really doesn't maturate fully until around the ages, sometime between the ages of 20 and 24 years. So what we've tried to explain as we teach this to teachers is self-regulation is what makes self-control possible. Self-regulation refers to a mechanism that is housed in the oldest part of the human brain. It's housed at the top of the brainstem, particularly in one single structure called the hypothalamus. And it really controls a whole bunch of mechanisms that we're going to try to understand that are critical for how well a child will do in all 5 domains of self-reg. So the 5 domains, if you don't know, are biological, having energy, dealing with stress, emotional, being able to deal with your catastrophic emotions, but also having positive emotions, experiencing love, interest, curiosity, cognitive, social, and prosocial. And Roots covers 2, 4, and 5. What's so interesting about this structure is how old it is. It's somewhere between 50 and 60 million years old. It is incredibly old. So neuroscientists divide the human brain into 3, we talk about 3 brains, 3 distinct brains. I don't know how many of you are neuroscientists here, so I won't go into detail. But the 3 brains are the newest brain, the neocortex, the human brain, which in our form is somewhere around 200, maybe 300,000 years old. And then underneath that new brain, there's an older brain, which is called the mammalian brain. And that's the limbic system, the amygdala in particular, which is the source of strong emotions, the source of the kinds of emotional associations that we form as we go through life. But underneath those 2 is a 3rd brain, an ancient brain called the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain was designed to deal with danger. The reptilian brain is kind of like the human brain's alarm system, and it never goes off. The reptilian brain runs 24/7. So what it's doing is it's constantly monitoring for danger. I'll give you a real interesting example of this. I was just telling Mary, I just came back from a long trip, and I was in Australia, and I've been traveling a little too much. And when I got to Perth, the first night, I went to sleep at about 8, and I woke up at 3 in the morning. I was absolutely in a state of fight or flight, full state of fight or flight. Why? Well, because in my sleep, I'd heard the door rattling. And when the door rattled, what happened was my middle brain interpreted this as a burglar, even though I was way high up. So I'm lying there, and then, fortunately, the prefrontal came in and said, well, it's probably not a burglar because unless it's Spider-Man, you're safe. So then the scientist in me kicked in, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I wonder what my heart rate is. So what we use this is our science tool. So on our iPhone, we have something called My Heart Buddy. So I clicked on My Heart Buddy, and I saw that my heart rate was about 100 beats a minute. Okay, now, anybody want to take a guess what controls heart rate? You weren't paying attention. Thank you. Okay, so my heart rate was around 100 beats a minute, and I don't have a little blood pressure, whatever those sphygmometers attached to my iPhone, but I'm sure my blood pressure had gone up. Do you want to take a guess what controls blood pressure? Okay, so you get the idea here, right? So then I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Now we have another one called My Breath Buddy. So I thought, well, I wonder what my breath is. So I was breathing 40 breaths a minute, okay? Just out of curiosity, what controls breathing? Okay, this is very cool, right? So this tiny little mechanism, which is housed at the top of the brainstem, controls all those functions. Why? Why would the hypothalamus have raised my heart rate, raised my blood pressure, and raised my breathing? That's a question. This is a small room. You can answer. Why do you think?
Getting ready to run or fight.
There you go. Thank you. Why would it do that? Why would it have to raise, don't answer it again. Why would it have, Well, he knows the answer, so it's no fun. Why would it raise heart rate? No, seriously though, why would it raise heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing in order to get ready to run or fight? So? Tell me physically, like, so what? Why would it do that? Why? Okay, so the adrenaline is what he's talking about. The adrenaline is what triggers these things. Okay, finish that.
Well, if your heart rate is at 60, you're going to be much slower than your heart is pumping.
Why? Well, yes. Yes. Good. So what has to happen here for this to happen is I have to get glucose and oxygen into the muscles. That's what they run on. But you got a problem. And the problem that, or at least the reptilian brain has a problem. And the problem that the reptilian brain has is we have a finite amount of glucose. We run on glucose. Human beings, that's what we are. We run on glucose. And we also run on there's a sugar in alcohol, which is one of the reasons why we like to drink. It's not the only reason. But our main source of energy is glucose, and we have a small tank. So say it's like owning a Fiat Cinquecento. You know, it's a tiny little tank. And so now the hypothalamus has a problem. This is a really ancient part of the brain, and it is unbelievably stupid. I mean, it's so stupid that it thought that the banging door was a burglar, right? It doesn't know. So its problem is that when it goes into fight or flight, because this was designed, let's say 50 million years ago, because it's so ancient, it's going to assume it's a predator. And it doesn't know how long this damn thing is going to be chasing me, trying to catch me. As far as it knows, it could be this could be a 3-day run. So what it does is it starts to shut down things. It starts to shut down what it regards, what evolution regarded as non-essential functions in order to have enough glucose so that my muscles can continue to fight or flee. So what do you think it shuts down? What are some of the things? Yep. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, I was going to tell you. Well, you know, when we do this kind of thing, like, you guys should know each other, so you shouldn't be so shy about, you know, like he said it quietly in case he was wrong. But he wasn't, he was right. So it shuts down thinking. It shuts down prefrontal. Because thinking, as you all know, I mean, you know, after the lecture, or just during the lecture, your head's going to start to hurt. Thinking is expensive. And so in this state, you know, you're in danger here. This could be a saber-toothed tiger. I don't need you thinking. I don't need you pausing and saying, you know, it's a tiger, run. I could, right? So what happens is it shuts that down so that your actions are now under the control of limbic and reptilian. You are now a creature of impulse, and you should be thinking about those children that you see. You should be thinking about those kids that are highly impulsive. Why is this happening? Well, it's a sign that something has shut down, and then the question we want to ask ourselves is, why is it shut down? We'll get to that in a sec. Okay, so thinking does shut down, and the example that I give when I teach this properly is I once had hypothermia. I was rescuing a dog. It's a long story, and it's a stupid dog, and the dog went back in, and I got hypothermia, and I was only 50 feet from the shore of my causeway, and I couldn't turn around to get out. I was frozen, and my son had been watching the whole thing from the house, and he came running out to save the dog. So fortunately, I came with the dog. But I really do wonder sometimes what might have happened to me had my son not been home, because I stood there, like literally, it was like being in a fog. So that's very interesting. Okay, what else shuts? Well, by the way, what shuts that down? So you see how this thing is working? This thing is in charge of the gas tank. In fact, the way we explain it is the theory of self-regulation is about 150 years old. It was first discovered by the father of modern physiology, a Frenchman called Claude Bernard. And then it was rediscovered early in the 20th century by a great Canadian called Hans Selye, who taught Fraser. Fraser then taught me and Clyde, so it's a very interesting, that's where self-regulation came from in this Canadian context. So the model that they used to explain it was a thermostat. A thermostat is a classic self-regulating system. So you set the thermostat at 20, and the idea is that the temperature turns on at 17, turns off at 22, because we have to conserve energy and we don't want things to overheat. Well, that's what we're looking at when we're looking at what the hypothalamus does. It shuts down things and it turns in order to raise the heart, raise the breathing, raise circulation, et cetera. Okay, what else does it shut down? There's some very interesting things it shuts down. You can figure this one out. Yep. Yeah, why would it do that? Great answer. Terrific answer. She's absolutely right. Because the function of digestion is to give you energy tomorrow, right? Well, we don't, the hypothalamus doesn't know. By the way, it's the hypothalamus, again, that shuts down digestion. So it doesn't know there's going to be a tomorrow. So at this point in time, digestion consumes the same amount of energy as the brain. The two biggest burners of energy in the human body are brain and gut, and they both consume the same amount. It's about 15% each of our total energy. So that's a huge unnecessary, at this point in time, it's unnecessary. So it shuts down digestion. Think about the kids if you're educators, the kids who never seem to know that they're hungry. What is that telling us? Okay, what else does it shut down? The reason you got a cold is because travel and jet lag are stressors. They are physiological stressors, and they turn off, they suppress. Yes, they shut down the immune system. That's why you got the cold, because normally you don't get sick. So this is very interesting. In the hypothermia example, the cold, the ambient temperature is a stressor, and you all know that, right? You know how hard it is for you to think or to digest if you get really, really hot or really, really cold, because you're burning so much energy. Well, in this case, jet lag or even flying is a stressor. Okay, what else shuts down? Yes. So think about now, okay, so I'll just address this to this side because there's only one man on this side. Oh, there's two, forgive me. So I want you to think of something when your husband did something that was incredibly stupid even for him. Okay, so you're now fit to be tied. How eloquent were you? Got your thoughts out nice and lucid, were you? No, because what happens is we start to struggle for our words. So stress has a profound impact. And now we have to, again, we think about a child who's overstressed has literally no capacity. If you ask him, how do you feel? You're clearly not a parent. That child will not answer, that child cannot answer, and you have to find other strategies. And we have lots of strategies that we use clinically for when children are highly stressed but cannot speak. Okay, so this is very interesting. Each of these functions is turned off or on by the hypothalamus. Some very interesting ones are turned off. And one of the most interesting ones is the muscles this was discovered by Porges. Steve discovered this. The muscles in the middle ear constrict, and the capacity to hear the human voice is dramatically reduced. So now you think about the kid who doesn't respond when you call his name 16 times. Well, it could be he's being oppositional. I'll bet you $100 that he's not. I'll bet you anything that he's overstressed, and this is a sign that this is shut down. But then the question is, why would it shut down? Sorry, I find this stuff so interesting that I don't keep to my own game plan. Why do you think it shuts down? Why would it shut down? It shuts down that kind of hearing in order to accentuate a different kind of hearing. Anyone can you take a guess? Do you know the answer to this? This is a toughie. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's a real interesting thing. Okay, in this room, at this moment, there are at least 4 or 5 different stressors. I'm just going to do one. Do you hear the slight hum behind me? How many of you does it bother? Okay, so only maybe a 10th. How many does it now bother? Okay, what happens is under stress, that's called a low frequency, it's a low frequency sound. And under stress, the hypothalamus shuts down the part of the brain that listens to the human voice in order to heighten, intensify the part that listens for for low-frequency sounds. Why would it do that? Why would it be so, it's called kindling the alarm system. Why would it be so focused on low-frequency sounds? Take a guess.
Out of danger.
Like?
Out of danger.
Like?
Animals or
Exactly. I don't know where you, is that South African accent? Yeah, that's exactly right. No, well, she's cheating, right? So she comes from a country where they have to. I moved to the island. I live on an island. I called my wife. We've been there about 3 days. And I said, call our next door neighbor. He's an old timer because we've got a bear in the backyard. It was a raccoon. So I take that with that. Okay, but that's exactly right. So what happens is that, unfortunately, now what can happen for a child that's, say, going to school, this is a real concern for us. Because if a child comes to school in a heightened stress state, whatever the cause of the stress is, whatever that stress is coming from, it could be psychosocial, it could be familial, it could be biological, there is an awful lot of low-frequency sounds in every single school in Ontario. HVACs. We have fluorescent lighting. Ballast gives off low-frequency sounds. So one of the things that we've done in, like we work in communities where there's an awful lot of trauma, like a huge amount of trauma. So pretty much every single kid is either traumatized or raised by someone who is traumatized. We give them earphones, earplugs, sound canceling headphones, and the change in their behavior is extraordinary. Because what's happened is you've removed what you said. You've removed that further source that's triggering fight or flight. Just by blocking out what for that child is a bit like, we compare it to having a car alarm where the alarm goes off when a leaf lands on the bonnet of the car. That's what stress does to a child who's in a state of heightened stress reactivity. So all the stuff that you're reading about these days, the stuff that the epigenetics, whatever, thank you, at U of T are doing, I don't know if there's any here, this is why it's so important. It's telling us about the mechanics of this kindled alarm system. That's what Fraser did too when he did HPA. Okay, so here's what I wanted to do tonight. So it's only taken me 40 minutes to get there. What I wanted to do tonight was there's another part that shuts down that's very, very interesting. What shuts down is our ability to mind read. What shuts down is our ability to read body language, to read affect cues. This is incredibly important for the work we do with parents that have been traumatized or raised by traumatized parents. Because historically what's happened is people have come in and tried to educate them, tried to teach them how to be a good parent. Well, that wasn't actually the problem. There was a classic study done in this in 1990 by 0 to 3 in which they took these traumatized moms and instead of trying to educate them, what they did was they worked on their self-regulation. And the guy who did this is the guy who trained me. And what they found was as their stress diminished and their ability to control their own stress enhanced, their mind reading naturally kicked in. It's a very, very important discovery. So that's what self-regulation is. Self-regulation is all about the mechanism that we use, that the hypothalamus uses to monitor for danger. It is the system that we use to deal with stress and then recover. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. It's the spending, recovering. The last time I was here, I was talking about the gas pedal and the brake. The hypothalamus puts its foot on the gas to deal with the stressor, and then it puts its foot on the brake to recover from that episode. These two things have to be finely calibrated in order for a child to have healthy development. Okay, so you got a gas pedal, which is your sympathetic. That's the adrenaline. One of them said adrenaline. So adrenaline is secreted by the sympathetic nervous system. So that's gas pedal, and then brake brings you back. It balances you off. You have to have that. You have to have that because of all the reasons we just did. All those things that shut down, all those things that are suspended while you're in a state of stress, you need your immune system. You need your digestion. So you have to have the brake to bring you back so that they kick back in, so that digestion comes back online, immune system comes back online. Do you understand this? I've done it a little bit too quickly. I'm going to show it to you, though, so you really, really see it. So when we look at babies, what we get to see is this gas pedal brake in its purest form. We can see how important it is that we as caring adults supply that support for the brake so that the brake doesn't wear out. If the child has too much stress in their life, for whatever reason, the brake wears out. It loses its resilience. It loses its ability to go back into digestion, back into his example of the prefrontal, back into a healthy immune system. Every single problem that we're seeing in children today can be traced to too much stress, which has worn out their brakes. Okay? That's what self-reg is all about. So to explain this a little more clearly, I want to show you one video, and then we can start to talk about it, okay? So I want to introduce you to Emerson. Oh, you've got it over here. Emerson is 8 months old, and Emerson's mommy has a cold.
Does Mommy's nose scare you when I blow it? Does that scare you when Mommy blows her nose? Yeah? You're silly baby.
Okay, so that's a beautiful example of the gas pedal and the brake, how well they work together. Now, with Emerson, it's not that hard to see when the brake has come on, right? And in fact, it's the same with all kids. So when you work with kids, I mean, there's very simple signs for when they are overstressed. And the first sign we look at is, are they laughing? Are they smiling? We look at their skin color. We look at their pupils, all kinds of stuff. But it's very easy to see it. Okay, so here's your interesting question here. You can see now from what I said why it's so important to bring him back, why it's so important for him to reach that zone where in that zone he can begin to learn. In that zone he can start to learn about the meaning of sounds, vocalizations. He can learn about the meaning of facial expressions. So learning occurs, just to come back to what he said at the very beginning, learning only occurs in that state. When the child's in this state, obviously he's not going to be learning. And in fact, if you were to peer beneath the surface, if we did some brain scans, what we would see is that the middle part of his brain, the limbic system, is firing like crazy. And we'd find that his heart is beating like mad. So he's gone into exactly your state. He has gone into an 8-month-old's version of fight or flight. Okay, so obviously that's incredibly expensive on a little brain, so we got to bring him back. What brings him back? What brings him back? A baby cannot bring itself back. Whoops. A baby can't bring itself back. So what brings him back? That mechanism hasn't developed yet. The mechanism to bring yourself back has not developed, has not maturated. Yep. Okay, so we assume correctly that mom is smiling. And now he associates that what else does mommy do? So, okay, so we've got mommy smiling and vocalization, plus she stops blowing her bloody nose. Okay, so here's a question for you. What happens to that baby if, this happens to babies all the time, right? 24/7, there's going to be something that scares them. Here, what he's scared by is simply a sound he's never heard before, coming out of an organ that he didn't know made sounds. But all kinds of things scare them, right? What happens if nobody's there? Or what happens if mommy is there but doesn't respond at all? what happens to baby? Now you can answer this one. What did Tronic tell us?
Well, yeah, they go into a state of stress, basically, the still face paradigm.
The still face paradigm. You guys all know what it is? What Lisa's talking about? Lisa was paying attention. Lisa actually taught this. So this is a real, so when we look at the sort of gurus of self-reg, Ed Tronic is one of them. In 1976, he designed an experiment, which you could not get through today, but he got it through. And what he did was he took 8-month-old, exactly the same age, Lisa, and he had 8-month-old sit with mommy. You can see this on the internet if you'd like to. You can just Google Tronic, Tronick, still face. And you can see actual videos of how it works. So he'd have mommy and baby sitting opposite each other, and they'd be playing happily. And then he instructed mommy, now, when I tell you, stop smiling, no vocalizations. I want a completely still face. So the baby goes nuts. So the first thing a baby does is they try to bring her back. They try to seduce her. That was Stanley's word. They woo her. So they get real cute, and that doesn't work. So then they become, what Lisa said, then they become very distressed. Okay, so they start flailing their arms and their legs. And then if she still doesn't respond, they go very, very still. They shut down. But if you look below the surface at that child, at that baby that is shut down, what you will discover is that its heart is beating like crazy. Its breathing is very rapid and shallow. Its brain is highly, highly aroused, particularly in the limbic system. So the look of a kid who has shut down is very deceptive. What happens in the worst of all situations if she actually responds with anger or some sort of, well, we'll come back to that in 2 seconds, okay? But you can see from this little vignette the importance of a system that Porges called the social engagement system. And that's what Stan and I wrote our first book about. And basically it's what I talked about the last time I was with you guys. But essentially what it's about is that a child learns how to self-regulate by being regulated. By being regulated by an attentive, loving, caring adult. That's what attachment is. It's supplying these systems that are missing in the kid. And unfortunately, they don't really fully develop until around puberty. So we have to be constantly exercising that regulating role as and when needed, especially in school. Because odds are that in a school setting, we've got that child for more actual contact hours than they're having with their own parent. It's 1,000 hours a year. It's an awful long time. Okay. I want to show you one more video because I'm going to get my warning in a second, aren't I? Yes. Okay, I want to show you one more video because this one is very similar, but it makes a further incredibly interesting point. This is baby Rachel, and her mommy's going to sing.
Mommy's going to sing you a song? You want mommy to sing a song, honey? Let me know how you feel about the song, okay? I don't want you to come round here no more. I beg you for mercy. You don't know how strong my weakness is, or how much it hurts me. 'Cause when you say it's over with her, I want to believe it's true. So I let you in, knowing tomorrow I'm gonna wake up missing you, wake up missing you, when the one you love's in love with someone else. Don't you know it's torture? I mean, it's a living hell. No matter how I try to convince myself, this time I won't lose control. So I let you in, knowing tomorrow I'm gonna wake up missing you, wake up missing you. Oh, you feel the pain in the song, eh, honey? Big tears. You crying? Oh, you crying, monkey. Okay, mommy's done. You okay? It's just a song. It's just a song.
Thank God she stopped singing. Okay, so this is a very, very interesting little video. So you see that the babies, the same two mechanisms are operating, the gas pedal and the brake. But by the end of the song, the recovery has now broken down. So she, at the very end, she can't come back. We don't get any more of those smiles. So she has stayed now in fight or flight. Okay, so here's an interesting question for you. Why tears? Why is she crying? That's a very interesting question. Yeah. That's what we want to think. But then again, she's 10 months old. She hasn't even got a word. Mom thinks that. Mom thinks this is about empathy. Would Stuart really have shown this if he was talking about physiology? No, it's not about empathy. That's, yep.
I tend to think the child sees the mother producing an unusual sound,
So what?
unfamiliar,
Yeah, so what does it do to the kid?
scary.
Yes. Who said that? Yeah. Oh, sorry, it's Mary. You're not allowed to play. You're not allowed to play this game, Mary. Yeah, she's scared. No, that's where you were going. Yeah, she's scared. Okay, so she's scared because of what you said. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Why tears? Why tears? So it could have a communicative function, but the hypothalamus isn't that smart. By the way, what do you think controls tears? Okay, so the hypothalamus doesn't. It's way too ancient. Think reptiles, right? A reptile doesn't do anything to try to signal, to try to do something. It doesn't have that kind of intelligence. This is a really ancient, basic mechanism. And it's trying to get rid of something. What's it trying to get rid of? Yes, who said that? Say it loud. No, sorry, I thought you said something else. Okay, I'm just going to tell you because I'm running out of time. It's trying to get rid of cortisol. So why does it need to get rid of cortisol? Well, because we need the cortisol. Cortisol is the brake. So we have a couple of neurohormones that are actual brake. Cortisol and serotonin are principal. And we need those to counteract the adrenaline. So the adrenaline gets stimulated by the gas pedal, by the fight or flight. But adrenaline's toxic. So if you've ever had something like, say, a near accident in your car, and you remember how you felt afterwards, that kind of, so we have to get rid of it. So what happens is the hypothalamus triggers the release of flooding through the parasympathetic, floods it with cortisol. But now you got a problem. Cortisol, if there's too much cortisol in the bloodstream, it can cause cellular death in the brain. It can cause cellular death in the cerebellum. So we got to get rid of the cortisol. And with the baby, there's only 4 ways, in fact, with all of us. Tears, which is in Fogel, tears are saturated with cortisol. So crying is a wonderful, that's why you need to get your husbands to cry. And tell them that Shanker explained there is a physiology behind this. I'm the worst of, okay. So there are 4 ways that the baby can get rid of its cortisol. Crying is one. Want to take a guess at the other 3? Yep. And the 4th? If you get those 3, you get the 4th. Huh?
Exercise?
No. Well, exercise, but not with the baby, right? But exercise is fabulous for us because of the perspiration, which gets rid of it. But for a baby, their biggest one after crying is drooling. Well, crying, drooling, and peeing. We had a very interesting case, actually. I've got 10 minutes, so I can digress for a sec. We had a very interesting case just a couple of weeks ago. It was a 6-year-old who had not been toilet trained. So he came to school, and the teacher insisted that there's a medication you can stop urination. And she insisted that either he be put on the medication or not be allowed to come to school because she didn't want to have to change his diapers. So that was in September. So then what happened by Christmas was the child had severe behavioral problems, and basically they wanted to kick him out of K. But the thing is that the heightened urination was in fact a sign of heightened stress. And so what they'd done is, and it's a classic example of suppressing the symptom rather than addressing the cause. So when you this is the problem with all medication without therapy. When you suppress this child's symptom, the peeing, what you'd done was you had totally ignored the fact that this child had a number of stressors, all biological in his case. And so it looks for a different outlet. And you can begin to see how self-reg works, right? So the idea behind self-reg is when we get a problematic behavior, it might be aggression, it might be heightened impulsivity, it might be mood problems, all kinds of signs that the kid has too much stress. So certain things are shut down, okay? Now the reason I like Rachel, this video, is because Mummy does get it wrong. Mummy thinks that this is a sign that her baby is an empath. I have this vision of Mummy singing to the poor little kid every week, and every time the kid cries, the mom says, oh, I'm really doing wonderful things for her emotional development. So, you know, by the time the kid's 3, she'll be coming to my clinic. But think about it, what we just did, right? Like crying, it turns out, in a 10-month-old is kind of complicated. And this is one of those areas where science can really help us as it starts to explain what this mechanism is and what the significance of this sign is. Now, babies have so many different ways of expressing when they are in a state of heightened stress. We had a parent about a year ago who called us. He had a 9-month-old, and he was it was a Monday morning. He was very upset because his wife had cut herself over the weekend, and when the baby saw it, the baby laughed. And so he said to me on the phone, he said, we have to come see you. I'm worried that my baby is a sadist. So, we had to, very gently put his mind at ease that, this is just how the baby expressed, in this baby. So here we've got one baby who does this. I've got one baby who cries. I've got another baby who laughs. But they're all the same mechanism, and it can be highly variable which behavior we see. Now, what I wanted you to do was relate all this to what's happening in a typical Roots session. Because we can figure out all this stuff. We can figure out what these behaviors mean. But it takes us a long time. So typically we talk about, it takes us about 8 weeks to really understand what's going on with the kid, to understand what the behaviors are. And if we had baby Rachel, you wouldn't have been, if I hadn't explained it, you wouldn't have been so sure. But at the back of your mind, a bunch of you were uneasy because I could hear the kind of, ugh. So you knew something wasn't quite right. And if you got to see her, over time, you would put the story together. And this is, I believe, an essential aspect of why Roots is so effective. Because what's happening is that the kids, because of the continuity of the experience, not just in terms of the baby, but also in terms of the facilitator who is there to unfold all this, what they're beginning to learn is the incredible variability of how babies express this, but they're also beginning to learn to recognize when that baby comes back to that zone, when that baby is calm. And it's quite interesting how when the baby laughs just here, you have a visceral response, like we feel it. And it's the same when you're in a Roots classroom. When you see the kid, when you see that baby getting soothed by their mom, what it does is, yes, you're understanding something about the baby. You're seeing what's happening as she regulates the baby. So you're getting this incredibly vivid lesson in self-regulation, in regulating. But you're also internalizing. And that's where I wanted to go tonight. Because I think at the end of the day, the problem that we're seeing over and over, so this is my last thing for tonight, okay? The problem that we're seeing over and over in so many of the programs that have been rolled out in the country they are above the child's developmental capacities. The child isn't at a level where they can actually process the information that we're trying to convey. So, you know, like we tend as adults to be very metacognitive. So we'll use a word like, we'll say to the child, I've got a 7 or an 8-year-old, I need you to calm down. Well, he doesn't know what the hell that means. What he may do is he may parrot it. He may, I've gone into situations in classrooms where we've been working and have little kids come up to him and say, I need to be calm. And he's bouncing off the walls. But he knows that that's what he was supposed to say. In fact, calmness is it's a very complicated concept. And so I won't go into that now. What I love about Roots is what it does is it personalizes everything for the kid. So the child can learn at a speed that is commensurate with whatever that child's developmental abilities are. And in a typical K or a typical grade 1, so you're working with 6, 7, 8-year-olds, they're going to have tremendously disparate capacities. But because they can process, there's not a clock here. There's not someone who's saying to them, you know, you've got, okay, now it's on to the next part of the curriculum. They get to work at their own speed. And what I found fascinating when I went around with you, with Lisa, was watching how I could spot the kids that really didn't know what the hell's going on. And they get there. And it took them a little bit longer. But the reason why they get there is because the experience, I believe, is, and this is where it'd be fun to do dyadic, the experience is both one of understanding but also experiencing. They themselves are mirroring what they're seeing in the child. So it's an example of, like, you know, one of the big questions on our mind is how do we translate Roots into, now what we need is, you know, like the full-grown tree for teens, because God knows they need it. What they're not getting is, okay, so I'll just tell you real fast because I've exhausted my time here. So what we look at are the 3 elements which we believe are the roots of the roots. And the 3 elements are experiential, emotional, and cognitive, okay? So what does that mean? Well, experiential means when you see the baby go like this, when you go into fight or flight, your muscles are very, very tense. When he relaxes, the tension leaves. All the blood leaves the muscles, right? They're engorged. They go back into that flaccid state. We have a generation of children that are, I want to say, not constantly, but very close to being constantly tense. And tension is incredibly expensive. And it's expensive because it's raising the heart, it's raising breathing, it's raising blood pressure to get you ready. And unfortunately, the system that controls this is the hypothalamus, and it's making them tense even while they're sleeping. Now, we can explain why, and that really is a lecture for another night. A lot of factors that are contributing to this, but we have a generation, the short answer is we have a generation of children that have not been in that state. I want to say this real carefully. A generation of kids who have not been in that state where their muscles are flaccid, where their muscles are loose. And so what we can do is, I can take a class of 7-year-olds and I can say, okay guys, we're all going to sit around now and we're going to focus on our breathing and you're going to do a chant for 3 minutes. But if you've seen 7-year-olds that are tense try to do this, you will know that this is impossible. You have gone way above their experiential capacity. Roots does not do that. What Roots does is it lets them find their own tempo. And in this experience, their muscles will relax. The next time you go to a class, you watch their bodies and you'll see it. You will see the tension. And you can see tension, by the way, in a kid's face. And we have various ways of doing it. If you don't know how to do it, just get in touch with my clinic. We have someone who teaches this. But there are signs that you learn how to read that tell you when a child's tension is relaxing. It's easy for you to figure out why they're so tense, right? Think about the things that they're doing in their free time. That's why they're tense. Okay? I don't want to explain, all right? Can you just trust me on this? All right, anyways, the point is that, and we have research that tells us, that Doug Williams did, that tells us that we have an incredibly high level of tension. The second thing is the experience must be positive. It must be enjoyable. It must be fun. Otherwise, they won't do it again. Otherwise, the next time the roots teacher comes back, you're going to find that half the kids are away with a cold. They come back, they will come back because the experience was, and this is not reflected on enough, how much children genuinely enjoyed this experience. Okay, the third element is the last one, and I thought this is really interesting, and we'll close on it. The third element is cognitive. So we forget that before you get to, like when you hear the word cognitive, you immediately think Phil Zelazo or something like that. But what we're seeing is a bunch of kids that are not at the level of doing executive functions. These are children that aren't aware of what's happening inside their body or around them. This is the heart of Fogel's work. What Alan Fogel has shown is the exercises you can do. He does it with adults, we do it with kids. Exercises to promote basic cognitive awareness. Awareness of when you're hungry. Awareness of when you're tired. Awareness of when you're tense. It's only when you have that core, that base level of awareness, and the technical term is interoception and exteroception. Interoception is awareness of your physiological or your emotional state. Exteroception is being aware of body language or sounds, whatever. It's only when the child has awareness that the kid can now begin to develop executive functions. What Roots is doing is it's working on the core, the base levels, on all 5 of the domains. That's why the program works. So it's the only example I know of a program that works at the child's developmental level, builds in that variability because they're all at different developmental levels, and lets them develop at their own pace. So there's a reason why we support it. Okay? So where are we going to go from here? I think what's going to happen is, if you've heard me talk other times, we're kind of scared. Like, we have a huge number of kids that are in this gray zone where they're neither mentally ill nor mentally healthy. What do we do? Well, it turns out we know what to do. It turns out we don't have to actually go out and experiment on that one now. We had to prove that it worked, but that's been done. And so now it's just a case of ensuring that every child gets, that we work on the foundations. You work on the foundations before everybody, if you ever built a house, you get strong foundations, and then you can worry about what your scaffolding is going to look like. So that's why I come to these things. I guess my final thought when I look at this is I need you guys, because I'm getting tired. And you should be getting tired. It's time for you guys to take over now, and that's why you're here tonight. So you have to get up and you have to get the message out. It's very important that you get our parents on board. We need our parents to understand everything we've done tonight so that they put pressure on those in politics, so that the ministry gets the support they need, so that we don't have these fights anymore. It's happening, okay? It's happening in Canada at a pace that I never dreamt was possible, that Fraser certainly didn't dream was possible. So it's an exciting time, and I feel that I've done my part. Now it's up to you, and don't screw up.
So before everyone gets up and goes out to get the message out, Stuart, can we keep you for a little bit
Sure.
longer? All right, so I think the deal was Stuart started this conversation. We're going to keep him a bit longer, but I think the deal is you guys have to finish it. So if we could open the floor up to any questions or comments for Stuart's reaction. You could either shout it out from your seat, or we've got a microphone set up here. Who will be the bravest to do this up? Please.
I heard you speak a number of years ago, and I can't remember the details around it, but I'm wondering how much you're talking about tonight relates to young children being exposed to screen
Yes.
ongoing stress level.
Yeah.
Was everyone ever able to hear that question? Great, thank you.
Do you want to repeat it?
I think I will not do as good a job as the question asker, but it was a question about how much screen time probably affects some of the things that you mentioned about mind reading.
So that is like at the top of our list of concerns. So can I answer it with one example? Okay. So for us, what we're worried about is, I mean, you have to be very careful here because there are some positive, incredibly positive aspects of things like iPads, and we use it religiously in the work we do. So it's a case of knowing, where to use it and where not. But the danger here is that video games in particular are physiological stressors. And what we know from the numbers, when we look at the incidence rates of problems in kids that are escalating, I mean, the best example is the study that TDSB did in February of 2012, the anxiety study in high school students. So you all saw that study, right? So, I mean, there were some problems with the study, and this is a self-report study, but basically 3/4 of the kids identified themselves as having very serious problems with anxiety. And anxiety is like your number one indicator of an overstressed system where the brake is worn out. And anxiety doesn't come from nowhere, and now we're getting better and better at identifying anxiety in little guys, although it's still one of the hardest things. For those of you interested in screening, you should know that it's the hardest thing for us to do in the screen is identify anxiety in a kid. It really takes a long time to get to know the kid because they can be so different in how they express it. Anyways, but then over the last, say, 7 years, scientists began looking at the physiological costs of these systems. And what they discovered, and so these are physiological stressors. So I just wanted to give you one example of this. We now know that there are two kinds of sleep. Sleep is said to be the number one stressor on children today. So our kids don't sleep enough. They sleep somewhere between 1 to 2 hours less a night than a decade ago. Okay. But we now know that there are two kinds of sleep, restorative and non-restorative. So in restorative sleep, you have something called a slow brainwave. And it's when your energy levels get replenished. Now, how many of you, be honest now, how many of you have had 8 hours of sleep and woke up feeling like utter crap? Let's rephrase that. For the ones that are lying, is it possible that there is somebody in this room that slept 8 hours and has never felt crappy the next day? Okay, that's better. So what's going on here? So we all say the same thing to each other. Well, we say it's because I slept too long. Well, it's not because of that. So what happened was when you had that non-restorative sleep, that 8 hours, but you still felt awful, what happened was you were in a state of very high tension. And humans are very poor at knowing, that's one of our biggest weaknesses. We're really, really bad at knowing when we're tense. Unless you meditate, you're really bad at it. So think about it now. You've gone to sleep. So this has gone to sleep, but this thing never sleeps. So it's kept you in fight or flight the entire night. That's why you have those ridiculous dreams, right? So you have, so you're running or whatever, you're trying to escape something. It had nothing to do, Freud got this completely wrong. It has nothing to do with sex. It has everything to do with tension. And so you're exhausted because while you were asleep, this monitoring system was constantly preparing for danger with fight or flight. So your muscles are tense, everything's engorged, et cetera, et cetera. You're spending an enormous amount of energy. Now, why am I telling you this? Because the big discovery that was made this past summer that was reported in Nature was that video games an hour before bed puts the kid into a state of heightened tension. So what's happened is not only are these children underslept, but they had not had restorative sleep. So they're coming to school the next day in no fit state to learn. Well, anyways, you get the point, right? So the paradox of all this is, what should they do? before they go out? So we're talking, let's say we're talking kids 7 to 12. What should they do before they go to sleep? So they get that nice restorative sleep. What should they do? A lot of you have had kids. Yeah. And that's the irony, because reading does the opposite. So what reading does is it down-regulates. So reading is actually one of the most effective ways we have for self-regulating, for rebalancing the system. So what happens with reading is the child will go into that natural step down. Instead of falling asleep because they're exhausted, what happens is if you've seen the arousal scale that we use, the Brausselin scale, they go from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 and then into sleep, nice sleep. So it's a fascinating example where we now know, there's some very interesting studies done in the States showing us that almost every kid now is on the screen right up until lights are out, not reading. In all the years I've done this, I have never, ever seen a bad kid. There isn't such a thing. Everybody needs to understand this. It's a kid with a tiny little brain and a reptilian system that's too stupid to know what's a danger and what's not. But when we calm it down, what happens is we get a whole new kid. And always is a kid that'll blow you away. Always. We don't know how. We can never predict. And Stan used to say to me over and over again, the idea of an IQ test is absurd, because you never know how smart a kid is until, so see if you follow this, until you reduce his anxiety. Because when a child is anxious, he's in chronic fight or flight. When he's in chronic fight or flight, he's shutting down PFC. So what's happening is you're getting a very false read because of his heightened stress of what his capacities are. You have no idea until you bring that anxiety down. The point here, just to bring it back to what we've done tonight, is the point is learning how to reframe a child's behaviors. That's what this is all about, reframing a child's behaviors. Instead of thinking that he's non-compliant, that he's not making an effort, instead what we're going to ask ourselves is this behavior an expression of a kid who's under too much stress?